What would you do if you discovered the girl you loved had been lied to for 14 years, that her mother's death was a murder disguised as mercy, and that the man she just married was the same monster who destroyed your family? This is the story of Ethan Carver, a man who ran from tragedy once and vowed never to run again. A story of Catherine Hayes, a woman who thought she was saving her dying mother only to discover she'd sold herself to a killer. And this is the story of how love buried under lies, guilt, and 14 years of silence finally fought back. If you love tales of second chances, redemption, and the courage to face the past, you're going to want to hear every word of this. So hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and let's begin. She's been dead 4 days. Mountain man finds childhood love married to her mother's killer. She's been dead for 4 days. Ethan Carver stared at the frozen corpse in the overturned wagon, his breath forming white clouds in the Montana cold. December wind howled through the pines, carrying snow that stung his weathered face. The woman's hand still clutched a lettering smudged but readable. He shouldn't have opened it, shouldn't have touched anything, should have ridden on and let the dead keep their secrets. But the moment he saw the handwriting, delicate, slanted, achingly familiar, his hands moved on their own. Catherine, my beloved daughter, I lied to you. The boy you loved never died. I told you the Carver family perished in the massacre because I thought separating you from him would keep you safe. But I was wrong. Love doesn't die because we bury it with lies. If fate allows, find him. Find Ethan. Tell him I'm sorry. Tell him you never forgot. Your mother, Molly Hayes. The letter slipped from Ethan's gloved fingers and fell into the snow. Catherine Hayes. The name hit him like a rifle shot to the chest. Catherine Cat, as he'd called her when they were young. The girl with wild chestnut hair who climbed trees faster than any boy in Missouri. The girl who caught snakes with her bare hands and laughed when they bit her. The girl who'd promised the summer she turned 15 that she'd wait for him forever. That was 14 years ago. Ethan had been 19, then the eldest son of Sergeant James Carver. His father had been investigating missing weapons shipments from the fort, uncovering a smuggling operation that stretched from St. Louis to the frontier. Ethan remembered the tension in their home that final week. His father pacing at night, writing letters by candlelight, telling Ethan's younger brother to stay close to the house. Then came the night of fire and screaming. The Blackfeet attack had been swift and brutal. Ethan had been in the barn when the first shots rang out. He'd run toward the house, seen his father fall defending the doorway, watched his mother and brother drag from the flames, and Ethan had run. He'd grabbed a horse and ridden into the darkness, guilt and terror driving him deeper into the wilderness with every mile. He'd been 19 years old and he'd abandoned his family to die. For 14 years, that shame had lived in his bones, freezing him from the inside out, just like this Montana winter. He'd become a trapper, a ghost, a man who spoke to no one and trusted nothing but the silence of the mountains. Until now. Ethan looked down at Molly Hayes' frozen body. She'd been traveling alone, the wagon poorly packed, wheels not fitted for winter terrain. She'd been desperate, running to someone, running to Catherine. He secured the body as best he could and lashed it to his pack horse. The nearest town was Timber Ridge, 2 days south through mountain passes that would be impassable in another week. If Molly Hayes had been heading there, then Catherine must be there too. Ethan mounted his Mustang and turned south. The wind carried his words away as he spoke to the frozen woman behind him. I'll find her, Mrs. Hayes. I'll make sure she knows. Shamir. The journey to Timber Ridge tested every skill Ethan had learned in 14 years of mountain living. The snow fell thick and relentless, erasing the trail behind him even as he forged ahead. Twice his Mustang nearly lost its footing on ice-slick rocks. Once he had to lead both horses through a narrow pass where a single misstep would have sent them plunging into a frozen ravine. But Ethan didn't stop. At night, when he made camp in the shelter of pine groves, he'd sit by small fires and read Molly Hayes' letter again and again. Each time, new questions surfaced. Why had Molly lied about the massacre? What had she been protecting Catherine from? And why, after 14 years, had she decided to tell the truth? The third question haunted him most. Did Catherine even remember him? She would be 29 now, a woman not the wild girl who'd raced him across summer fields. She might be married, might have children, might have built a life that had no room for a ghost from her past. But Molly's letter suggested otherwise. Tell him you never forgot. On the second afternoon, as the sun began its early winter descent, Timber Ridge appeared through the curtain of snow. It was a small town, perhaps 200 souls nestled at the base of the mountains, where the land flattened just enough for farming and commerce. Smoke rose from chimneys warm and welcoming against the brutal cold. Ethan guided his horses down the main street, past the general store with its frost-covered windows, past the blacksmith's forge, where orange light flickered. At the far end of town, a small white church glowed with candlelight. Wagons stood out front, wheels half buried in fresh snow, and from inside came the sound of a fiddle playing. Laughter, celebration, a wedding. Ethan's stomach tightened. The timing felt wrong. Molly Hayes had been dead for days, yet someone in this town was celebrating. He dismounted outside a building with a weathered sign, Fletcher's Inn. A boy burst from the stable adjoining the inn, no more than 14, all red hair and freckles and eager energy. "Afternoon, mister. That's quite a storm you rode through." The boy's eyes widened as he took in Ethan's appearance. The buffalo coat crusted with ice, the wolfskin cap, the rifle slung across his back, the hard lines of a face that had forgotten how to smile. Ethan's voice came out rough from days of disuse. "My horses need rest and feed. The pack horse is carrying a body, needs to be kept cold." The boy's enthusiasm dimmed. "A body who?" "Molly Hayes." The boy went pale. "But Mrs. Hayes died last week. We buried her already." "At the cemetery east of town." Ethan felt ice that had nothing to do with the weather creep through his veins. "What day did she die?" "December 18th, sir. Lung fever. Mr. Blackwell paid for everything. The doctor, the burial, everything." "Who's Blackwell?" The boy glanced toward the church where music and laughter continued to spill into the darkening evening. "Victor Blackwell, richest man in the territory, owns the freight company that runs from Denver to Fort Benton. He's getting married right now, to Mrs. Hayes's daughter, to Catherine." The world tilted. Ethan gripped the saddle to steady himself. "Catherine Hayes is getting married today." The boy nodded enthusiastically, apparently deciding that the stranger's shocked expression was mere surprise at missing the town's social event of the year. "Yes, sir. Whole town's at the wedding. They say Miss Hayes, well, Mrs. Blackwell, now I guess is the prettiest lady these parts ever saw. She and her ma arrived 2 months back from Philadelphia. Mrs. Hayes took sick almost right away. Mr. Blackwell, he was real kind. Paid for all the doctoring, and when Mrs. Hayes passed, he paid for the funeral too. Folks say he proposed to Miss Catherine the very next day, to comfort her, you know, so she wouldn't be alone." Each word was a knife sliding between Ethan's ribs. Molly Hayes had died December 18th. Today was December 22nd. The body on Ethan's pack horse was Molly Hayes, which meant whoever was buried in the cemetery east of town wasn't Catherine's mother, and Catherine had no idea. "Take care of the horses," Ethan said quietly, handing the boy a silver dollar. "And the body, don't let anyone touch her until I return." "Yes, sir. Will you be staying at the inn?" Ethan was already walking toward the church. "Maybe. First I need to see that wedding." The church doors stood open despite the cold, warm candlelight spilling across the snow. Ethan approached slowly, drawn by something deeper than curiosity. Through the windows, he could see the small crowd inside, maybe 40 people, all dressed in their winter best, all focused on the front of the church, where a preacher in black robes stood beside two figures. The groom emerged first. Victor Blackwell was a thick man in his early 40s, broad-shouldered and barrel-chested, wearing a black suit that strained slightly across his middle. His face was flushed, whether from the warmth of the church or from drink, Ethan couldn't tell. His hand was clamped around the arm of his new bride. Then she stepped into view. Ethan forgot to breathe. Catherine Hayes emerged from the church into the falling snow, and for one impossible moment, time collapsed. She wore a simple dress of white cotton, modest and unadorned. Her hair, still that rich chestnut brown he remembered, was pinned beneath a thin veil. When she lifted her face to catch the snowflakes, Ethan saw the delicate features that had haunted his dreams for 14 years. The tilt of her chin when she was thinking, the slight curve of her nose, the way her lips pressed together when she was worried. She was more beautiful than memory allowed. No longer the freckled girl who'd run barefoot through Missouri fields, but a woman graceful, composed, heartbreakingly real. And then she turned. Her eyes met his through the falling snow, and the world stopped. For one long, impossible moment, recognition flared in those green eyes, green like sunlight, through leaves green like the creek where they'd caught crawfish as children. Her lips parted in surprise. Her hand rose slightly as if reaching for something lost. The crowd around her faded. The cold wind stilled. There was only Catherine staring at him, like she'd seen a ghost step out of her past. Then she moved. Despite Victor Blackwell's firm hold on her arm, Catherine slipped free and started across the snow-covered street. Her white dress trailed behind her, the hem already darkening with moisture. She walked toward Ethan as if pulled by a force older than reason. Ethan found himself moving too, his boots crunching through the fresh snow, closing the distance between them until they stood face to face in the middle of the street, while the wedding party watched in confused silence. Up close, she was even more beautiful. Fine lines at the corners of her eyes spoke of laughter, or worry, or both. A small scar on her jawline, new since he'd last seen her, told of some accident or hardship. Her hands, when she clasped them in front of her, were rougher than a lady's hands should be. She'd lived. She'd survived. She'd grown into someone magnificent. Her voice, when she finally spoke, trembled with emotion he couldn't name. "Do you recognize me, Mountain Man? I was your childhood neighbor." The old nickname, the one she'd teased him with when he'd first started trapping at 16, broke something open in his chest. His own voice came out rougher than he intended. "Cat. Libby." Her smile was sad, touched with a nostalgia that hurt to witness. "No one's called me that in years. It's Elizabeth now. Catherine Elizabeth." And as of 10 minutes ago, her eyes flickered with something that might have been regret or resignation. Catherine Elizabeth Blackwell. Behind her, Victor Blackwell's voice cut through the moment like an axe through ice. "Catherine, what in blazes are you doing?" She flinched, a small movement, barely visible, but Ethan saw it. Saw the way her shoulders tensed. Saw the way her hands curled into fists before she forced them to relax. "Victor, this is..." She paused, seemed to search for words. "An old friend from Missouri, Ethan Carver." Victor Blackwell approached with heavy steps, his face darkening with something that wasn't quite anger yet, but was heading that direction. Up close, Ethan could smell the whiskey on him, could see the possessiveness in the way he gripped Catherine's arm. "Pleasure to meet you, Carver." Victor's tone suggested it was anything but. "Now my wife needs to get inside. She's overtired from the excitement, and this cold isn't good for her delicate constitution." Catherine opened her mouth as if to protest and closed it again. But her eyes found Ethan's one more time, and in them he saw something that made his blood run cold. Fear. Not the dramatic terror of immediate danger, but the quiet, desperate fear of someone who just realized they'd made a terrible mistake and had no way to undo it. "It was good to see you," she said softly. I'm glad you're alive, Ethan. I always wondered." Victor pulled her back toward the church where the wedding party waited. But Catherine resisted just enough to call back over her shoulder, "Will you be staying in town?" "For a while," Ethan heard himself say. She nodded, then allowed herself to be led away. Ethan watched as Victor Blackwell paraded his new bride back into the crowd, accepting congratulations, laughing too loud, drinking from a flask he pulled from his coat pocket. And Catherine walked beside him like a prisoner in a white dress. Fletcher's Inn was warm and nearly empty when Ethan finally entered. The common room held a few scattered tables, a fireplace crackling with pine logs, and a long bar where a thin man with spectacles sat reading by lamplight. The man looked up as Ethan approached, his scholarly face registering surprise at the wild-looking stranger who just walked in from the storm. "Need a room for the night," Ethan said, setting a silver dollar on the counter. The clerk, Fletcher, presumably blinked at him through his spectacles. "Of course, sir. Though I should warn you, there's quite a bit of noise from the festivities. The whole town's celebrating the Blackwell wedding." "So I saw." Fletcher handed over a key. "Room's upstairs, second door on the right. Supper's available if you want it, though most folks are at the church hall for the wedding feast." Ethan took the key, but didn't move toward the stairs. Instead, he walked to the window and looked out at the street. Snow fell in thick curtains now covering wagon tracks, softening the harsh edges of the frontier town. Across the way, the church doors opened, spilling golden light and laughter. The wedding party emerged, Victor Blackwell, first his arm around Catherine's waist, possessive and tight. Then came the rest, well-dressed townspeople, Farmers in their Sunday clothes, a few rough-looking men who might have been Blackwell's employees. Fletcher appeared beside Ethan, 2 glasses of whiskey in his hands. He offered one to Ethan. "You knew the bride," Fletcher said quietly. It wasn't a question. Ethan accepted the whiskey. "Long time ago. Different life. She seems like a kind woman. Gentle. Not—" Fletcher trailed off, seemed to reconsider his words. "Not what—" Fletcher took a long drink before answering. "Not suited for a man like Victor Blackwell." Ethan turned to study the innkeeper more carefully. Owen Fletcher was older than Ethan had initially thought, maybe 50, with silver threading through his dark hair and beard. His hands, Ethan noticed, bore the calluses of a man who'd done hard labor most of his life, and his eyes held the wariness of someone who'd learned to keep dangerous thoughts to himself. "What kind of man is Blackwell?" Ethan asked. Fletcher glanced toward the door, as if checking to make sure they were alone. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. "The kind who gets what he wants. The kind who doesn't hear the word no. His freight company controls every shipment between here and Denver. If you want to do business in this territory, you do business with Victor Blackwell. And if you cross him—" Fletcher left the sentence unfinished. "His first wife," Ethan said. "What happened to her?" Fletcher's expression darkened. "Sarah Blackwell. Died 2 years back this November. Fell down the stairs, they said. Broke her neck." He paused. "But Dr. Brennan, that's our town. Doctor, he told me in confidence that Sarah had bruises, old ones, the kind that don't come from falling downstairs." Ethan's hand tightened around his glass. "And nobody said anything. Who would we say it to? Sheriff Dalton owes Blackwell money. Judge Carlton does business with him. Most of the town depends on Blackwell's freight company for their livelihood. When you're that powerful, Mr. Carver, people learn to look the other way. Even when a woman dies suspiciously? Even then." They stood in silence for a moment, watching through the window as Victor Blackwell helped Catherine into a carriage. Even from this distance, Ethan could see the way she held herself stiff, careful, like someone trying not to break. "The mother?" Ethan said. "Molly Hayes. Tell me about her death." Fletcher refilled both their glasses. "Lung fever, according to Dr. Brennan. She and Catherine arrived here in late October, Mrs. Hayes was already coughing, already weak. Blackwell took an interest right away, offered to pay for the doctor for medicine for a room at the boarding house. He was very, attentive. To Catherine or to her mother? To both, but especially to Catherine after Mrs. Hayes took a turn for the worse. He proposed 3 days after the funeral. Said he wanted to take care of Catherine, make sure she wasn't left destitute. Some folks thought it was noble. Others?" Fletcher shrugged. "Others thought it was awfully convenient timing." Ethan set his glass down with more force than necessary. "I need to see Dr. Brennan." "It's late, Mr. Carver, and the doctor's likely at the wedding feast." "Then I'll wait." Ethan started toward the stairs, then paused. "One more thing. Where's the cemetery?" "East side of town past the church." "Why?" "I need to see Molly Hayes' grave." Fletcher's eyebrows rose. "You knew her too." "She was my neighbor, 14 years ago in Missouri." Ethan met the innkeeper's gaze. "And I don't think the woman buried in that grave is Molly Hayes." The cemetery sat on a small hill overlooking Timber Ridge, surrounded by a low fence of river stones and wooden crosses. Snow covered everything, making the graves into smooth white mounds punctuated by dark markers. A few had real headstones, expensive ones, carved from imported granite. Most were simple wooden crosses with names burned or carved into the wood. Ethan found Molly Hayes' grave near the back beneath a young pine tree. The headstone was modest but well made. "Molly Catherine Hayes, 1825 to 1884. Beloved mother, she rests in peace." The ground was still freshly turned despite the snow cover. Someone had placed winter berries on the grave, a touching gesture, probably Catherine's doing. Ethan knelt in the snow and brushed it away from the base of the headstone. December 18th, 1884, 4 days ago. But the woman currently frozen to his pack horse had died much more recently. Perhaps yesterday, certainly no more than 2 days ago. Someone had buried a stranger in Molly Hayes' grave. And Catherine had no idea her mother was still alive, or had been until she died trying to reach her daughter. Ethan pulled Molly's letter from inside his coat and read it again by the faint moonlight filtering through the clouds. I lied to you. The boy you loved never died. Why had Molly told Catherine that his family had been massacred? Why separate them so completely? And why, after 14 years, had she finally decided to tell the truth? The answers weren't in this cemetery. They were back in town in the house where Catherine Hayes no. Catherine Blackwell now was spending her wedding night with a man Ethan was increasingly certain had murdered his first wife. Ethan stood brushing snow from his knees. The church bells were ringing again, celebrating the newlyweds. Somewhere in one of those warm houses, Catherine was learning what it meant to be Victor Blackwell's wife. And Ethan was standing in a graveyard holding a dead woman's letter, trying to decide whether to honor a 14-year-old promise to a girl who might not even remember making it. No, that wasn't true. She remembered. He'd seen it in her eyes. I won't run this time, Ethan said quietly to the grave, to Molly Hayes wherever she really was. I promise you that. I won't leave her alone with him. The wind carried his words away into the darkness. Snow continued to fall, covering his tracks as he walked back toward town. The Blackwell house stood at the edge of Timber Ridge, larger than any other building save the church. It was a two-story structure of imported lumber, painted white with green shutters, a declaration of wealth in a town where most buildings were rough-hewn logs. Light glowed in several windows despite the late hour. Ethan stood in the shadow of a pine grove across the road watching. He shouldn't be here. Shouldn't be spying on a married woman's home like some lovesick fool. But something kept him rooted in place, some instinct he'd learned to trust during 14 years of surviving in the wilderness. A woman's scream cut through the night. It was quickly muffled, but Ethan heard it clearly. His body moved before his mind caught up, crossing the road at a run, stopping just short of the front door. Through a side window, he could see into what looked like a parlor. Victor Blackwell stood in the center of the room, swaying slightly, a whiskey bottle in one hand. Catherine stood near the fireplace, one hand pressed to her face. Even through the window, Ethan could see the red mark blooming on her cheek. Victor was speaking, his voice loud enough to carry through the glass, but too slurred for Ethan to make out words. Catherine shook her head at something he said. Victor took a step toward her. She backed away. He grabbed her arm, pulled her close, said something directly into her face. Catherine nodded once, defeated. Ethan's hand went to the knife at his belt before he forced himself to stop. Forced himself to think. Breaking into Victor Blackwell's home on the man's wedding night would accomplish nothing except getting Ethan arrested or killed. Catherine was Blackwell's wife now. The law would side with the husband, not the stranger from out of town. But watching Catherine's shoulders slump in resignation, watching her allow herself to be pulled from the room and toward the stairs, was one of the hardest things Ethan had ever done. He stayed in the shadows until the house went dark, until he was certain Victor had fallen into drunken sleep. Then he walked back to Fletcher's Inn, his hands shaking with rage he had no outlet for. Tomorrow he would find Dr. Brennan and get answers about Molly Hayes' death. Tomorrow he would figure out what Victor Blackwell was hiding. Tomorrow he would find a way to help Catherine if she would let him. But tonight all he could do was lie awake in a rented room, listening to the wind howl and remembering a girl who used to laugh without fear. Dawn came gray and cold. Ethan woke before first light, his body conditioned by years of wilderness, living to rise with the sun regardless of how little sleep he'd gotten. He dressed quickly, strapped on his knife and pistol, and went downstairs. The common room was empty except for a woman working at the hearth, middle-aged, sturdy, with flour on her apron and competence in every movement. She looked up as Ethan descended the stairs. "Coffee's ready if you want it," she said. "Breakfast in an hour." "Thank you, ma'am. You'd be Mrs. Fletcher." "That's right. And you're the stranger who rode in during the wedding yesterday. Caused quite a stir, I hear." Ethan accepted the coffee she poured him. Didn't mean to. "Didn't say I did." She studied him with sharp eyes. "You knew Catherine Hayes before." "News traveled fast in small towns." Ethan nodded. "Long time ago." "Shame about her mother. And shame about Mrs. Fletcher trailed off, seeming to reconsider whatever she'd been about to say. "About what?" Mrs. Fletcher lowered her voice. "About her marrying Victor Blackwell 3 days after burying her mother. That's what." Girl was grieving, vulnerable, and Blackwell swooped in like a vulture. Whole thing felt wrong to those of us who were paying attention. But nobody said anything. What could we say? Blackwell's rich, powerful, and Catherine had no family left. From a practical standpoint, it made sense. From every other standpoint, she shook her head. Well, God help her is all I can say. The door to the inn banged open, bringing a gust of cold air and snow. The red-haired stable boy from yesterday stumbled in, his face pale. "Mama, you need to come quick." Mrs. Fletcher dropped the dish rag she'd been holding. "Tommy, what's wrong?" "It's that body Mr. Carver brought in, the frozen one. I went to check on it this morning and, Ma, it's Mrs. Hayes, the real Mrs. Hayes. I'm sure of it." Every eye in the room turned to Ethan. Mrs. Fletcher's face had gone white. "Tommy, that's impossible. We buried Mrs. Hayes 4 days ago." "Then who's buried in the cemetery?" The boy's voice cracked with distress. "Because the woman in our root cellar is definitely Molly Hayes. I helped carry her to the grave. I know her face." Ethan set down his coffee cup carefully. "Your boy's right, Mrs. Fletcher. The woman I found died within the last 2 days, which means whoever you buried on December 18th wasn't Catherine's mother." The implications hung in the air like smoke. Mrs. Fletcher sank into a chair. "Dear God, does Catherine know?" "Not yet," Ethan said, "but she needs to, today." "You can't just walk up to the Blackwell house and tell her something like that," Mrs. Fletcher protested. "Victor won't allow it. He barely lets her out of his sight. Then we'll have to find another way." Ethan looked at Tommy. "You said you helped with the burial. Did you see the body? The one they put in Molly Hayes' grave?" Tommy shook his head. "Coffin was already sealed when we carried it to the cemetery. Dr. Brennan said Mrs. Hayes looked too poorly from the sickness, said it would be better if folks remembered her as she was." "How convenient," Ethan muttered. He stood decision made. "I need to see Dr. Brennan, now." Mrs. Fletcher gave him directions to the doctor's house, a small cottage behind the church. As Ethan pulled on his coat, she caught his arm. "Mr. Carver, whatever happened between you and Catherine in the past, you need to be careful. Victor Blackwell is a dangerous man. If he thinks you are trying to come between him and his wife—" "I know," Ethan said quietly, "but I made a promise to Molly Hayes, and this time I'm not running away." Dr. Isaiah Brennan answered his door wearing yesterday's clothes and the haggard expression of a man who hadn't slept. He was older than Ethan expected, mid-50s at least, with silver hair and the tremor in his hands that spoke of age or illness or something else entirely. "Dr. Brennan, my name is Ethan Carver." "Yes, I know. The whole town knows by now." The doctor's voice was rough, tired. "You're the man who made Catherine Blackwell forget herself at her own wedding. I need to talk to you about Molly Hayes." Something flickered in the doctor's eyes, fear or guilt or recognition. He glanced up and down the snowy street, then stepped aside. "Come in, quickly." The doctor's cottage was small but tidy, filled with the smell of carbolic acid and something sweeter. More medicinal. Morphine, Ethan realized. He'd smelled it before in field hospitals during his brief time in the militia. Dr. Brennan poured himself a glass of whiskey with shaking hands and didn't offer one to Ethan. "What about Mrs. Hayes?" "I found her body 2 days north of here in an overturned wagon. She'd been dead maybe a day when I found her." The doctor's glass stopped halfway to his mouth. "That's impossible. Molly Hayes died on December 18th. I pronounced her dead myself." "Then who did you bury?" The silence stretched long enough that Ethan knew he'd hit truth. The doctor finally set down his glass and sank into a chair. "How did you know?" Brennan asked quietly. "The dates didn't match, and Tommy Fletcher recognized the real Molly Hayes' body. Doctor, what happened?" Brennan's hands shook harder. He pulled a small brown bottle from his vest pocket, laudanum or morphine, and took a careful measure. When he spoke again, his voice was steadier but heavy with something that might have been shame. "Victor Blackwell came to me on December 15th, said Molly Hayes was dying, that she was in terrible pain, that morphine was the kindest option. He was very generous with payment, very persuasive." The doctor's eyes were distant, haunted. "I gave her the morphine, strong doses. She was already weak from genuine illness, you understand. It wouldn't have taken much." Ethan felt cold spread through his chest. "You killed her." "I helped her die peacefully." Brennan's voice rose defensive. "She was suffering, and Blackwell assured me it was what she wanted, that she'd asked for release from the pain." "But she didn't die." Brennan's face crumpled. "She should have. The dose I gave her should have been fatal, but the next morning when I returned to check on her, the room was empty. The bed hadn't been slept in, and Victor told me she'd passed in the night, that he'd already had the body prepared for burial. He had another woman's body, some vagrant, who'd frozen to death in an alley. He'd already put her in Molly's nightgown in Molly's coffin. And you went along with it. What choice did I have? Brennan's voice cracked. I'd given her fatal amounts of morphine on Blackwell's say-so. If the truth came out, I'd hang. And Blackwell made it very clear that if I caused problems, he'd see me destroyed. This town is my whole life, Mr. Carver. I have nowhere else to go. Ethan wanted to grab the doctor and shake him, wanted to rage at his cowardice, but he forced himself to stay calm, to think clearly. So Victor Blackwell faked Molly Hayes' death, buried someone else in her place. But why? What happened to the real Molly? I don't know. I assumed he'd finished the job himself, buried her somewhere in the wilderness where she'd never be found. Brennan looked up with red-rimmed eyes. She's really alive, or was when you found her. Dead now, but she'd been trying to get back here, to Catherine. Ethan pulled out the letter and showed it to the doctor. She wanted Catherine to know the truth, about me, about everything. Brennan read the letter with growing horror. He lied to Catherine, told her that marrying him was the only way to secure care for her dying mother. Catherine agreed on December 16th, the day after I gave Molly the morphine. Victor must have known Molly wouldn't actually die, that she'd wake up and try to interfere. So he faked her death, told Catherine her mother had passed, then proposed immediately. And Catherine, grieving and alone, said yes. She had no choice. No money, no family, no prospects. Victor offered security, or so she thought. Ethan's fists clenched. Like Sarah Blackwell had security, the first wife who fell down the stairs. Dr. Brennan's face went gray. You know about Sarah. I know she had suspicious bruises, old ones, the kind that come from a man's fist, not from falling downstairs. The doctor stood abruptly and went to a locked cabinet. He pulled out a key from around his neck and opened it, retrieving a worn leather journal. He handed it to Ethan. Sarah Blackwell's medical records. I kept them even after she died. Call it insurance, call it cowardice, call it whatever you want. But I documented every injury, every suspicious bruise. The broken ribs, she claimed, came from tripping over a rug. The black eye, she said, was from walking into a door. The miscarriage that happened 2 days after she and Victor had a public argument. Ethan flipped through the journal, his anger growing with each page. This is evidence of systematic abuse. Why didn't you take this to the authorities? I tried. Brennan's voice was barely a whisper. I went to Sheriff Dalton. He told me to mind my own business, that what happens between a man and his wife is private. I went to Judge Carlton. He suggested I was imagining things, that Sarah Blackwell was a clumsy woman and nothing more. 2 days later, Sarah was dead. And a week after that, someone broke into my office and stole half my morphine supply. A warning. I understood it clearly. So you stayed quiet. I stayed alive. Brennan met Ethan's eyes. I know what that makes me. I live with it every day. But yes, I chose survival over justice. And now another woman is in danger because I was too weak to act. Ethan closed the journal carefully. I need to show this to Catherine. She needs to know what kind of man she married. She can't leave him even with this evidence. The law gives husbands complete authority over their wives. Catherine is Victor's property now in the eyes of the law. Even if we proved he's a monster, even if we proved he murdered Sarah, Catherine would still be bound to him unless he chose to grant her a divorce. And men like Victor Blackwell don't grant divorces. Then we'll find another way. There is no other way. Brennan's voice rose to a shout, then broke. He collapsed back into his chair, reaching for his morphine again. Don't you understand? This is Montana territory, not Philadelphia. The law protects men like Blackwell, women like Catherine and Sarah. They're invisible, disposable, and men like me who could speak up. He took a long pull from his bottle. We're too broken to fight. Ethan stood. He felt something hardening inside him, something cold and certain. You're broken, doctor. I'll give you that. But I'm not. He picked up the journal. I'm keeping this. And I'm going to make sure Catherine knows the truth. All of it. It won't change anything. Maybe not, but she deserves to know. Ethan headed for the door, then paused. One more thing. My father, Sergeant James Carver. Did you know him? Brennan blinked in surprise. The officer who died in the Blackfeet massacre, that was your father. It wasn't Blackfeet. It was made to look like Blackfeet. My father was investigating weapons smuggling. Someone wanted him silenced. Ethan's voice was steady cold. I think that someone was Victor Blackwell. I think he's been running guns to both sides, to the army and to the tribes, for more than a decade. And I think everyone who got close to figuring it out ended up dead. The doctor's face had gone white. Dear God, if that's true, help me prove it. Help me save Catherine. And maybe we can both stop being cowards. Ethan left before Brennan could answer. He had what he needed: evidence of Victor's cruelty, confirmation of Molly's murder, and his own growing certainty that the man who destroyed his family 14 years ago was the same man who now controlled Catherine's fate. The question was, what could he do about it? The answer came from an unexpected source. When Ethan returned to Fletcher's Inn, he found a note waiting for him, delivered by a woman neither Fletcher nor his wife could describe, just someone who came and went quickly, face hidden by a shawl. The note was written in a hasty, educated hand. Mr. Carver, I cannot meet you openly, but I must speak with you. Come to the back door of the Blackwell house tonight at midnight. Catherine will be asleep. Victor drugs her tea to keep her compliant. I am a friend. Please trust me. M.G. Ethan showed the note to Owen Fletcher, who studied it with a frown. M.G. Fletcher mused. Could be Martha Graves. She's the Blackwell's housekeeper. Came to town about 6 months ago looking for work. Quiet woman. Keeps to herself. Can she be trusted? Fletcher shrugged. In my experience, Mr. Carver, the only people in this town who can't be trusted are the ones with power. Everyone else is just trying to survive. If Martha Graves is reaching out to you, she probably has good reason. So at midnight, Ethan found himself creeping through the shadows toward the Blackwell house, the snow muffling his footsteps. The house was dark except for a single candle burning in a downstairs window. The back door opened before he could knock. A woman stood there, late 30s, plain-faced but with sharp, intelligent eyes. She pulled him inside quickly and locked the door behind them. Mr. Carver, thank you for coming. Her voice was low, urgent. We don't have much time. Victor's asleep, but he wakes easily when he's been drinking. Who are you, Martha Graves. I was Sarah Blackwell's younger sister. Ethan felt the pieces clicking into place. You came here to investigate her death. I came here to find proof that Victor murdered my sister. But he's careful, very careful. I've worked in this house for 6 months and found nothing concrete until Catherine arrived. Martha's expression softened. She's in terrible danger, Mr. Carver. Victor he's escalating. Last night was the first time he struck her, but it won't be the last. The pattern is exactly what happened with Sarah. Tell me everything. Martha led him to a small servant's room off the kitchen and lit another candle. From beneath her narrow bed, she pulled out a bundle wrapped in cloth. Sarah kept journals, secret ones. She hid them in the walls of her bedroom, the room where Catherine sleeps now. I found them 2 months ago, but I couldn't do anything with them alone. No one would believe a housekeeper over Victor Blackwell. She unwrapped the bundle to reveal 3 leather-bound books. These document 2 years of systematic abuse. They also document Sarah's discovery of Victor's real business. She opened one journal to a marked page. Ethan read Sarah's neat handwriting. Victor thinks I don't understand his business, but I'm not stupid. The freight manifests don't match the cargo. Weapons leave Denver marked as farm equipment. Half go to Fort Benton for the Army. The other half go to the Blackfeet camps through intermediaries. He's selling guns to both sides of the conflict. The profit is enormous, but the cost in lives, I can't bear to think about it. I tried to confront him tonight. He struck me so hard I saw stars. Then he told me that if I ever spoke of his business to anyone, he'd kill me and make it look like an accident. I believe him. God help me, I believe him. Ethan's hands shook as he turned the pages. Entry after entry detailed Victor's abuse, his threats, his business dealings. And in the final journal, Sarah had written, I've decided to run. Martha has agreed to help. She'll meet me in Denver with money and tickets to San Francisco. I leave tomorrow night. Victor thinks I'm visiting a sick friend in town. Instead, I'll take the evening stage and never come back. Tomorrow, I'll be free. Tomorrow The entry ended there. The next page was blank. She died that night, Martha said quietly, the night before she was supposed to escape. Victor must have discovered her plans. Or Dr. Brennan told him. Martha's eyes widened. The doctor was involved. Ethan explained what Brennan had told him about his complicity in Molly Hayes's attempted murder. Martha listened with growing horror. Then we're running out of time. If Victor follows the same pattern with Catherine as he did with Sarah, he'll isolate her completely, then eliminate her once she becomes inconvenient or discovers too much. She already knows something's wrong. I saw it in her eyes yesterday. She knows Victor is cruel, but she doesn't know he's a murderer. And she doesn't know her mother is... Martha paused. Her mother is really dead. You're certain? I found her body myself. She died trying to reach Catherine. Martha sank onto the bed, her hands covering her face. That poor woman. And Catherine. Does she know? Not yet. I haven't found a way to tell her that won't put her in more danger. We need to get her out of this house. The law won't help us. She's his wife now. Martha looked up, her expression hardening. Then we work outside the law. We find proof of Victor's crimes that's so damning even his money and power can't protect him. And we do it fast before he hurts Catherine. How buys the Freyot office? Victor keeps his real ledgers there, the ones that show the actual cargo, the actual payments. If we can get those ledgers, we can prove he's been running guns. That's a federal crime. The Army would have to investigate. Ethan considered this. When does he go to the Freyot office? Every morning except Sunday. He leaves the house at 7, returns at noon for lunch, then goes back until evening. That gives us a window. Can you get Catherine out of the house during that time? Martha shook her head. He locks her in her room when he leaves. Says it's for her safety, but really it's to keep her from running or talking to people in town. Ethan's jaw clenched. He locks his wife in her room like a prisoner. Welcome to what it means to be Mrs. Victor Blackwell. Martha stood. But Catherine isn't entirely helpless. She's been sending me signals, little things, gestures I recognize from Sarah's journals. She knows she's in danger. She's looking for allies. Then we need to let her know she's found them. Martha nodded. Tomorrow morning, I'll find a way to pass her a message from you, something to give us hope. Then tomorrow night we break into the Freyot office and get those ledgers. And if we're caught, Martha's smile was cold, then at least we'll die trying to do the right thing, which is more than I can say I've done for the past 2 years. The morning came too slowly and too fast at the same time. Ethan spent the hours before dawn sitting by his window at Fletcher's Inn, watching the Blackwell house across the way. Watching for signs of life, signs of trouble, signs that Catherine had survived her second night as Victor Blackwell's wife. At 6:30, lamps began to glow in the windows. At 7 precisely, Victor emerged in his black coat and beaverskin hat, climbed into his carriage, and rode toward the business district where his freight office commanded the center of town. Ethan waited 5 minutes, then crossed the street. Martha opened the back door before he could knock, her face pale. Is she? Ethan began. She's alive, but barely herself. Martha pulled him inside. He gave her laudanum in her tea last night, enough to keep her docile and confused. She's awake now, but fragile. I need to see her. I know, that's why I sent for you. Martha led him through the kitchen and up the back stairs. But you need to understand she's not the girl you remember, Mr. Carver. 2 days of marriage to Victor Blackwell has broken something in her. You'll need to be gentle. They stopped outside a bedroom door. Martha produced a key from her apron pocket. He locks her in, she said quietly, every morning like an animal in a cage. The door swung open to reveal a well-appointed bedroom with fine furniture, silk curtains, and a woman sitting by the window in a white nightgown, staring at nothing. Catherine turned as they entered, and Ethan's heart broke. The vital, spirited woman he'd seen at the wedding was gone. In her place sat someone hollow-eyed and diminished, moving slowly as if underwater. A purple bruise marked her left cheekbone. Her wrist bore red marks where fingers had gripped too tight. Catherine, Martha said gently, you have a visitor, someone who cares about you. Catherine's eyes focused slowly on Ethan. For a moment there was no recognition. Then something flickered, memory, hope, fear, all tangled together. Ethan. Her voice was barely a whisper. You're real. I thought I thought I'd imagined you at the wedding. He crossed to her, moving carefully as one would approach a wounded animal. I'm real, and I'm here to help you. Help me? A bitter laugh escaped her. No one can help me. I'm married now. I belong to Victor. The law says so. The church says so. God himself says so. The law can be wrong. The church can be wrong. Ethan knelt beside her chair so he could look into her eyes. And I don't believe God wants you to suffer like this. Tears spilled down her cheeks. My mother is dead. I have nowhere to go, no money, no family. Victor is all I have. That's not true. Ethan pulled Molly's letter from his coat. Catherine, I need you to read this, and I need you to be strong for what I'm about to tell you. She took the letter with shaking hands. As she read, Ethan watched emotions cascade across her face. Confusion, disbelief, grief, and finally a spark of something he recognized from long ago, anger. My mother wrote this, Catherine said slowly, when recently, maybe a week ago. Ethan took a breath. Catherine, your mother didn't die on December 18th. Victor faked her death. The woman buried in the cemetery is someone else, a stranger. Your real mother was alive until 2 days ago. She was trying to reach you when her wagon overturned in the mountains. I found her body. I brought her here. The color drained from Catherine's face. No, that's impossible. I saw her. I said goodbye to her. Dr. Brennan pronounced her dead. Dr. Brennan was paid to lie, or threaten into it, we're not sure which. But Victor Blackwell staged your mother's death to force you into marriage. He told you that marrying him was the only way to save her, didn't he? Catherine's hands began to shake violently. The letter fell to the floor. He said mother needed expensive medicine, surgery maybe, that if I agreed to marry him, he'd spare no expense. I said yes on December 16th, to save her. Her voice rose. He told me she died peacefully 2 days later, that she'd been happy knowing I'd be taken care of. He told me. She broke off, pressing her hands to her mouth. Martha moved quickly to her side, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. He lied, Martha said firmly, about everything, just like he lied to my sister Sarah before he killed her. Catherine looked up sharply. Sarah, your sister. Sarah Blackwell, Victor's first wife, my older sister. Martha's voice was steady despite the pain in her eyes. I came to Timber Ridge to find out how she really died, and I found journals, Aura's journals, hidden in this very room. She documented everything. The abuse, the threats, Victor's criminal business. She was planning to escape when he murdered her. I don't understand. Catherine stood on unsteady legs, the laudanum still affecting her balance. Why would he murder her? Why marry me if he... Because men like Victor need to control something, Ethan said. And when they can't control it anymore, they destroy it. Sarah was going to expose him. You were vulnerable, grieving, alone, the perfect victim. No, Catherine backed away from both of them. No, this is too much. You're telling me my husband is a murderer, that my mother was alive when I married him, that I've been drugged and locked in a room like a prisoner. This can't be real. This can't. Her legs gave out. Ethan caught her before she hit the floor, lifting her easily and carrying her to the bed. She didn't fight him, just stared at the ceiling with eyes that had seen too much in too short a time. I want to die, she whispered. Just let me die. No, Ethan's voice was fierce. You don't get to give up Kat. The girl I knew, the girl who climbed trees and caught snakes and promised she'd be brave forever. She's still in there, and she's stronger than Victor Blackwell will ever be. That girl died 14 years ago when you disappeared, when my mother told me you were dead. She lied to protect you. From me, from the danger my family was in, from something. I don't know what yet, but she spent her last days trying to fix that lie, trying to get back to you, trying to tell you the truth. Ethan gripped Catherine's hand. Don't let her sacrifice be for nothing. Don't let Victor win. Catherine closed her eyes. For a long moment, she was silent. Then so quietly, Ethan almost missed it. What do you need me to do? The plan was simple, which didn't make it any less dangerous. While Victor was at his freight office, Catherine would search the house for anything incriminating, letters, documents, anything that might prove his crimes. Martha would keep watch. and Ethan would visit someone he'd been avoiding, the man whose silence had allowed all of this to happen. Sheriff Benjamin Dalton. The sheriff's office occupied a small building next to the jail, a sturdy structure of stone and timber, with bars on the windows. Ethan found Dalton behind his desk, a heavy-set man in his 50s with a star pinned to his vest, and the look of someone who'd made too many compromises for too many years. "Sheriff, my name is Ethan Carver. I need to report a crime." Dalton looked up from his paperwork with the weary expression of a man who'd heard every story twice. "What kind of crime, Mr. Carver?" "Murder, fraud, kidnapping, weapons smuggling. Take your pick." That got the sheriff's attention. He set down his pen. "Those are serious accusations. Who's the accused, Victor Blackwell?" Dalton's expression closed like a door slamming shut. "Get out." "Excuse me?" "I said, get out. I don't have time for troublemakers spreading lies about respectable citizens." Ethan didn't move. "I have evidence. Medical records documenting abuse of Sarah Blackwell before her death. Journals written in her own hand describing her husband's violence and criminal activities. Testimony from Dr. Brennan about the staged death of Molly Hayes. And the body of Mrs. Hayes herself, the real one, showing she died days after she was supposedly buried." Dalton stood slowly, his hand moving to the gun at his hip. "Mr. Carver, I don't know what game you're playing, but it ends now. Victor Blackwell is a pillar of this community. His wife's death was a tragic accident. Molly Hayes died of lung fever and was properly buried. And if you continue spreading these vicious lies, I'll have you arrested for slander." "You're protecting him." "I'm protecting the truth." "No." Ethan's voice was cold. "You're protecting yourself. Because if Victor Blackwell goes down, he'll take everyone on his payroll with him, including sheriffs who look the other way when women die suspiciously." Dalton's face flushed red. "You've got on a lot of nerve walking into my office and—" "My father was Sergeant James Carver, murdered 14 years ago along with my mother and brother in what was made to look like a Blackfeet raid. But it wasn't Blackfeet, was it? My father was investigating weapons smuggling, and when he got too close to the truth, someone arranged his death." The sheriff had gone very still. "I think that someone was Victor Blackwell," Ethan continued. "I think he's been running guns to both the army and the tribes for more than a decade. I think he's gotten rich off conflict and death. And I think everyone who's tried to stop him has ended up in a grave." Dalton sank back into his chair. For a moment he looked old and tired and almost human. "You can't prove any of that," he said finally. "Not yet, but I will. And when I do, Sheriff, you're going to have to decide which side of history you want to be on. The side that protected a murderer, or the side that finally did the right thing. The right thing gets people killed in Montana territory. So does cowardice, eventually." Ethan turned to leave, then paused. "Catherine Blackwell is in danger. Right now. Today. If something happens to her and you did nothing to prevent it, you'll have to live with that. Just like you've lived with Sarah Blackwell's death. Just like you've lived with my family's murder. How many more ghosts can you carry, Sheriff?" He left before Dalton could answer. Owen Fletcher was waiting for Ethan when he returned to the inn, his face grave. "There's someone here to see you. He's been waiting in your room for the past hour." "Who?" "Said his name is Captain Marcus Henderson. Retired Army. Says he knew your father." Ethan took the stairs two at a time. Captain Henderson was a lean man in his late 60s, still military straight, despite his age, with silver hair and eyes that missed nothing. He stood as Ethan entered. "Mr. Carver, I've been looking for you for 14 years. Ethan closed the door. "You knew my father." "I served with him. He was a good man, a good soldier, and he died because I was too slow to act." Henderson pulled an envelope from his coat, yellowed with age, sealed with wax. "Your father sent me this 2 days before he died. He told me to hold it unless something happened to him. When I heard about the massacre, I opened it. Inside were copies of documents proving weapons theft from Army stockpiles. Proof that someone highly placed was diverting rifles and ammunition to both legitimate buyers and to hostile tribes." "Victor Blackwell," Henderson nodded. "Your father had traced 3 years of illegal shipments back to Blackwell's freight company. He was preparing to make an official report when the attack happened. I tried to investigate afterward, but He looked away. Blackwell had friends in high places. Friends who made it very clear that pursuing the matter would be bad for my career and my health. I was a captain, then ambitious, with a family to think about. So I buried your father's evidence and stayed silent. For 14 years. For 14 years. Henderson met Ethan's eyes. Until I heard you were in Timber Ridge asking questions about Victor Blackwell. Until I heard he'd married again and that his new wife looked frightened. Until I realized that my silence had allowed more people to die. So I'm here now, Mr. Carver. Too late to save your family. Too late to save Sarah Blackwell, but maybe not too late to save Catherine. Ethan took the envelope. Inside were shipping manifests, payment records, letters in Victor's own hand arranging deals with Army quartermasters and tribal intermediaries. It was everything they needed. Almost everything. This proves the weapons smuggling, Ethan said, but it doesn't prove he murdered my family, or Sarah, or tried to kill Molly Hayes. No, but it's enough to get federal marshals involved, enough to freeze his assets and his business. And once he's under investigation, people who've been afraid to speak up might find their courage. Henderson paused. There's something else you should know. The man who commanded the Blackfeet raid on your family. His name was Running Wolf. I tracked him down 5 years ago. Before he died, he told me the attack was commissioned, that white men paid in rifles and ammunition to make it look like a tribal massacre. He never knew who commissioned it, but he remembered the go-between, a freight clerk named Samuel Watts, who worked for Blackwell's company, who died 6 months after your family thrown from a horse under suspicious circumstances. Ethan felt the pieces clicking into place. Blackwell hired the attack to silence my father, then killed the only witness who could connect him to it. That's my belief, but again, we can't prove it. Running Wolf is dead. Watts is dead. All we have is suspicion and circumstantial evidence. Then we need a confession. Henderson raised an eyebrow. You plan to make Victor Blackwell confess to murder. I plan to give him a choice. Confess and face trial or... Ethan didn't finish the sentence. Henderson studied him for a long moment. Your father wouldn't have wanted you to become a killer, son. My father is dead because good men stayed silent. I won't make that mistake. There's a difference between justice and revenge. Tell that to Catherine Blackwell. Tell that to Sarah. Tell that to my mother and brother. Ethan's voice was hard. I've spent 14 years running from what happened, hiding in the mountains because I was too much of a coward to face the truth. But I'm done running, Captain. With or without your help, I'm taking Victor Blackwell down. Henderson was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached into his coat again and pulled out a small badge, a deputy marshal's star. I still have some friends in the marshal's service. This is official as of this morning. You're deputized, Mr. Carver, which means when you confront Blackwell, you'll be acting under federal authority. It won't make you bulletproof, but it might keep you from hanging if things go badly. Ethan took the badge, feeling its weight. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. If we're wrong about any of this, both our careers and possibly our lives are over. Henderson stood. Now, what's your plan? The plan came together over the next few hours, with Martha and Catherine providing crucial details about Victor's routines and weaknesses. Catherine had recovered somewhat from the laudanum, though her hands still shook and her eyes held a fragile quality that worried Ethan. But when Martha had shown her Sarah's journals, something had hardened in her. The fear was still there, but now it was mixed with anger. He told me Sarah was clumsy, Catherine said, her voice tight, that she was always walking into doors tripping over rugs. He made her sound foolish, incompetent. Now I know he was describing his own handiwork. They were gathered in Martha's small room, speaking in low voices while Victor was still at his office. The real Molly Hayes' body had been moved to the undertaker's cold room where Owen Fletcher had convinced the mortician to keep quiet about the discrepancy between the two Mrs. Hayes. We need Victor to incriminate himself, Captain Henderson explained. Preferably in front of witnesses he can't intimidate or buy off. How? Catherine asked. He's too smart to just confess. People make mistakes when they're angry, Ethan said, when they feel threatened, when they think they're losing control. Martha understood first. You want to provoke him, make him lose his temper. More than that, I want him to think everything he's built is falling apart. that his secrets are exposed, his power is broken, his control is gone. Men like Victor, they can't stand losing control. They'd rather destroy everything than lose. Catherine's face had gone pale. And when he loses control, he'll come after me, just like he came after Sarah. Yes, Ethan met her eyes, which is why you need to be somewhere safe when it happens. Somewhere he can't reach you. There's nowhere in Timber Ridge he can't reach. Then we'll take you out of Timber Ridge. No, Catherine's voice was firm. If I run, he'll know something is wrong. He'll hide evidence, call in favors, disappear before you can prove anything. I need to stay. I need to be the bait. Absolutely not, Ethan said. It's not your decision. Catherine stood, and for the first time since he'd found her in that bedroom, Ethan saw a flash of the girl she had been. You said I needed to be strong. You said the girl who climbed trees and caught snakes was still in there. Well, she is, and she's telling you that I'm not running away while other people fight my battles. Catherine, he locked me in a room, Ethan. He drugged me. He hit me. He lied about my mother and tricked me into marriage and planned God knows what else. Her eyes blazed. I deserve to face him. I deserve to see him broken the way he tried to break me. I'm staying. Martha smiled slightly. She sounds like Sarah, right before the end. That's not comforting, Ethan muttered. But he knew Catherine was right. They needed her to stay to act normal, to give Victor no reason to suspect anything had changed, even if every instinct Ethan had screamed against putting her in danger. Captain Henderson cleared his throat. If Mrs. Blackwell's staying, we need to ensure her safety, which means we need more allies, people Victor can't control. Dr. Brennan, Martha suggested, too compromised, too afraid. Ethan thought for a moment. What about the minister, Reverend Matthews, Catherine supplied. He performed our wedding ceremony. But he's known Victor for years. I don't think every minister I've ever met takes their duty seriously, Henderson interrupted, especially when it comes to protecting the vulnerable. It's worth approaching him. I'll do it, Martha said. He knows me from church services, and he asked me privately after the wedding if Mrs. Blackwell was truly happy with the marriage. I think he had suspicions. Good. We'll need the church as a sanctuary point if things go wrong. Henderson pulled out a map of Timber Ridge and spread it on Martha's small table. Now, let's plan this properly. We have one chance to get it right. That afternoon, while Victor was still at his Freyot office, Catherine did something she hadn't done since arriving in Timber Ridge 2 months ago. She went for a walk. Martha accompanied her, both women bundled against the cold, moving slowly through the snow-covered streets. To anyone watching, they looked like a lady and her companion taking the air. But Catherine was memorizing routes, exits, places to hide, places to run if necessary. They passed the church where Reverend Matthews was preparing for evening services. The Reverend looked up as they entered, the surprise crossing his weathered face. Mrs. Blackwell, Miss Graves, how can I help you? Martha had rehearsed her approach carefully. Reverend, we need to speak with you about a matter of conscience, privately. The Reverend's expression shifted to concern. He led them to his small office and closed the door. What's troubling you? Catherine spoke first, her voice steady despite her nerves. Reverend, when you married Victor and me, did you have any doubts, any concerns? Reverend Matthews hesitated. Why do you ask? Because I need to know if I'm alone in feeling that something is very wrong. The Reverend sank into his chair. Mrs. Blackwell, a minister's duty is to counsel, not to judge. But I will admit, the speed of your courtship and marriage concerned me, as did the fact that you seemed more resigned than joyful at your wedding. But Mr. Blackwell is a prominent member of this congregation, and you seem to consent willingly, so I performed the ceremony. I consented under false pretenses. I was told my mother was dying and that marrying Victor was the only way to save her. But my mother was already dead. Victor had faked her death to manipulate me into marriage. The Reverend's face went white. That's a serious accusation. It's the truth. Martha pulled out one of Sarah's journals. And it's not the first time Victor Blackwell has used deception and violence to control women. For the next hour, they laid out everything: Sarah's journals, Dr. Brennan's testimony, the evidence of weapons smuggling, the connection to the Carver family massacre. Reverend Matthews listened in growing horror. Dear God, he whispered when they finished. All this time, all these years. I've been blessing a monster. You didn't know, Catherine said gently. None of us knew. He's very good at hiding what he is. But now you do know, Martha added, and we need your help. We need the church to serve as sanctuary if Catherine needs protection. We need you to bear witness to what we're about to do. And we need you to be willing to testify to what we've told you regardless of consequences. Reverend Matthews stood and walked to the window looking out at his small church. When he turned back, his face was set with determination. I took vows when I became a minister. To protect the innocent. To stand against evil. To speak truth even when it's dangerous. He met Catherine's eyes. The church will be open to you day or night, and when the time comes to testify, I'll stand with you. Before God and man, I'll tell what I know. Relief flooded through Catherine. Thank you, Reverend. Don't thank me yet. If Victor discovers what we're planning. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. They all knew the stakes. Victor returned home at 6 that evening earlier than usual. Catherine was waiting in the parlor, embroidery in her lap, the picture of domestic tranquility. Martha had prepared his favorite meal. Everything appeared normal. But beneath her calm exterior, Catherine's heart raced. Victor kissed her forehead, a gesture that made her skin crawl, and settled into his chair with a whiskey. How was your day, my dear? Quiet. Martha and I took a short walk this afternoon. The fresh air did me good. His eyes sharpened. A walk where? Just around the garden and down the street. We didn't go far. Catherine kept her voice light, unconcerned. I'm still quite tired from the wedding festivities. Victor studied her for a moment, then seemed to relax. Well, the fresh air is good for you, but don't overexert yourself. You're delicate. I'm not delicate, Catherine thought. I'm drugged. There's a difference. She'd been careful not to drink the tea Martha brought her this morning. The tea laced with laudanum. Had poured it into a plant when Martha's back was turned. The housekeeper had understood the signal and said nothing. Without the drug, Catherine's mind was clearer than it had been in days. Clear enough to be terrified, clear enough to be angry, clear enough to plan. Victor, she said carefully, I'd like to visit my mother's grave tomorrow, to bring flowers. His expression darkened. We've discussed this, Catherine. Prolonged grief isn't healthy. Your mother is at peace. You need to look forward, not backward. I just want to say goodbye properly. No. His voice was flat final. You'll forget this morbid obsession and focus on your duties as my wife. Is that clear? Catherine lowered her eyes submissively. Yes, Victor. But inside rage burned. He wouldn't even let her grieve. Wouldn't let her visit the grave of a woman who wasn't even there. Everything was control. Everything was possession. Well, not for much longer. I'm very tired, Catherine said, standing. I think I'll retire early. Victor's hand shot out and grabbed her wrist, too tight, bruising. The evening has barely begun. Sit with me. Victor, you're hurting me. My? He pulled her closer, his whiskey breath hot on her face. Or are you being overly sensitive? Sarah was always too sensitive as well. Perhaps it's a failing of women in general. Catherine forced herself not to flinch, not to pull away, to stay calm. I'm sorry, you're right. I'll sit with you. He released her wrist, mollified. Catherine sat back down, her heart hammering, her wrist throbbing. She could feel Martha's eyes on her from the doorway, could sense the housekeeper's concern. But Catherine kept her face serene, kept her hands steady on her embroidery, kept playing the role of the obedient wife. Because tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow, they would spring the trap. The next morning dawned cold and clear. Victor left for his freight office at his usual time, locking Catherine in her room as always. But this time, Martha had a key. This time, Catherine was ready. 10 minutes after Victor's carriage disappeared down the street, Martha unlocked the door. He's gone. We have maybe 4 hours before he returns for lunch. Catherine was already dressed, already prepared. Then let's not waste time. They met Ethan, Captain Henderson, and Reverend Matthews at the church. Dr. Brennan arrived last, looking worse than ever, shaking pale, clearly deep in the grip of his morphine addiction. But he'd brought his medical records, his testimony, his willingness to finally do the right thing no matter the cost. The freight office, Henderson said, spreading out a rough map. That's where he keeps his real ledgers. The ones showing actual cargo and payments. If we can get those along with the documents your father sent me, we'll have everything we need to bring federal charges. The office is locked, Martha said, and Victor has the only key. There's a back window, Dr. Brennan offered quietly. Sarah told me once that she'd sneaked into the office through it when Victor forgot some papers at home. Said it didn't latch properly. Everyone turned to look at him. You knew Sarah well, Catherine asked gently. She, she came to me sometimes, when the bruises were bad, when she needed someone to talk to. Brennan's voice broke. I should have done more. Should have helped her escape. Should have. You're helping now, Ethan interrupted. That's what matters. They divided into two groups. Ethan Henderson and Martha would break into the Freight office and retrieve the ledgers. Catherine, Reverend Matthews, and Dr. Brennan would go to the cemetery and exhume the false grave, proving that Molly Hayes hadn't been buried when Victor claimed. Are you sure about this? Ethan asked Catherine privately before they separated. Once we start, there's no going back. I've never been more sure of anything. Catherine looked up at him, and in her eyes he saw steel. Victor took everything from me. My mother, my freedom, my future. I want it back. All of it. When this is over, don't. She put a finger to his lips. Don't make promises about after. Let's survive today first. But she let him hold her hand for a moment longer than necessary before pulling away. Simone. The freight office sat in the center of town, a two-story building with Blackwell Freight and Shipping painted in gold letters across the front. The main floor held the public counter and waiting area. The second floor contained Victor's private office. Ethan Henderson and Martha approached from the alley behind the building, moving quickly through the morning shadows. The back window, as Brennan had promised, was slightly ajar, secured only by a simple latch that gave way easily to Ethan's knife. They climbed inside. Victor's office was exactly what Ethan expected: rich carpets, expensive furniture, paintings of hunting scenes on the walls. A massive desk dominated the room, its surface neat and organized. Behind it, a locked cabinet. That's where he keeps the real records, Martha whispered. Sarah told me he thought it was clever hiding the truth in plain sight in a locked cabinet while showing fake ledgers to anyone who asked questions. Henderson pulled out a set of lockpicks. Military training has its advantages. The lock was good, but not good enough. Within 2 minutes, the cabinet swung open to reveal rows of leather-bound ledgers and files stuffed with documents. Ethan began pulling them out, scanning contents. Shipping manifests that didn't match the public records. Payments from Army quartermasters for farm equipment that were clearly weapons. Receipts from intermediaries with Blackfeet names. Letters in Victor's own handwriting, arranging deals. And there, in a separate file, something that made Ethan's blood freeze. A letter dated September 1870 addressed to Samuel Watts. The Carver matter must be resolved permanently. The sergeant has evidence that could destroy everything we've built. I've arranged for Running Wolf and his men to handle the situation. Make sure they understand it must look like a random raid, kill everyone, burn everything, leave no witnesses. Payment as discussed, 20 rifles ammunition and 2 barrels of whiskey. Destroy this letter after reading. V.B. Ethan's hands shook as he held the evidence of his family's murder. Ethan, Henderson's voice was gentle. We need to keep moving. He planned it. Ethan's voice was hollow. Every detail. My mother, my brother, my father. All of it. He planned their deaths like a business transaction. I know. And now we'll make him pay for it. Henderson carefully took the letter and added it to the growing stack of evidence. But first we need to get out of here before someone sees us. Martha was already at the window keeping watch. The street's still quiet, but we should... She froze. What is it? Ethan asked. Victor's carriage, coming back early. Oh God, he's coming here. They heard the front door of the building open, heard Victor's heavy footsteps on the stairs, heard him calling for his clerk, Morrison. Where are those Denver contracts? There was no time to escape through the window, no time to hide. They were trapped in Victor Blackwell's office with evidence of his crimes spread across his desk and the man himself seconds away from discovering them. Henderson drew his pistol. Get ready. This is about to get interesting. The office door swung open. Victor Blackwell stood in the doorway, his face going from surprise to rage in the space of a heartbeat. What the hell is this? Ethan stepped forward, his hand on his own pistol. This is the end, Blackwell, of your business, your freedom, your life. All of it. Victor's eyes darted from Ethan to Henderson, to Martha, then to the evidence scattered across his desk. His face flushed red. You broke into my office. You're stealing my property. I'll have you arrested. You'll do nothing. Henderson interrupted, showing his marshal's badge. Captain Marcus Henderson, acting under federal authority. Victor Blackwell, you're under arrest for weapons smuggling, conspiracy to commit murder, and about a dozen other charges that'll keep you in prison for the rest of your natural life. Victor laughed a harsh, ugly sound. You think you can arrest me in my own town with my sheriff, my judge, my friends? You're fools. Your friends won't help you when they see this. Ethan held up the letter about his family's murder. Written in your own hand, ordering the deaths of innocent people. Something shifted in Victor's expression. The rage was still there, but now it was mixed with calculation. He was thinking, planning, looking for a way out. Where's my wife? He asked suddenly. Safe, Martha said. Somewhere you'll never touch her again. She's my wife, my property. The law, Henderson said coldly, is about to remind you that murder trumps marital rights. Now, you can come quietly or we can do this the hard way. Your choice. For a moment, Victor seemed to consider surrendering. Then his hand moved fast, reaching for something in his coat. Ethan was faster. His pistol cleared leather and fired in one smooth motion. The bullet caught Victor in the shoulder, spinning him around and slamming him against the wall. Victor collapsed, blood spreading across his expensive shirt, his face contorted with pain and fury. You shot me, he gasped. You bastard. You'll hang for this. No. Ethan's voice was ice. But you will. For my family. For Sarah Blackwell. For Molly Hayes. For every life you've destroyed in your greed and your cruelty. You will pay for all of it. Henderson was already binding Victor's wound and securing his hands. Martha ran to get the sheriff. Whether Dalton helped or not, they needed an official arrest recorded. And Ethan stood over the man who'd haunted his nightmares for 14 years, feeling not triumph, but something like grief. Justice wouldn't bring his family back, wouldn't undo Catherine's suffering, wouldn't erase the years of pain, but it was something. It was a start. At the cemetery, Catherine stood before the grave, marked with her mother's name, and felt nothing but cold fury. Dr. Brennan and Reverend Matthews had brought shovels. The ground was frozen, the digging hard, but within an hour they'd reached the coffin. Are you sure you want to see this? The Reverend asked Catherine gently. I need to see it. I need to know for certain. They pried open the coffin lid. Inside was a woman Catherine had never seen before, younger than her mother, with different features, different hair. A stranger dressed in Molly Hayes' nightgown, buried under Molly Hayes' name. Catherine felt something break inside her, not in weakness but in rage, a clean, purifying anger that burned away the last of her fear. Cover her, Catherine said quietly. Whoever she was, she deserves a proper burial. But not here, not under my mother's name. What would you like us to do? Reverend Matthews asked. Find out who she was. Give her her own grave, her own name, her own marker. Everyone deserves that much. And your mother, Catherine thought of Molly Hayes' body in the undertaker's cold room, thought of the letter she'd written with her dying breath, thought of 14 years of lies told to protect a daughter from a danger that had found her anyway. My mother gets the grave meant for her, and a headstone that tells the truth about when she really died, and a funeral where people can say goodbye properly. Catherine's voice was steady. She deserves that much too. They were filling in the grave when they heard the gunshot from town. All three froze. The freight office. Dr. Brennan said, his face going pale. Something's gone wrong. Catherine was already running. She gathered her skirts and ran through the cemetery, down the hill into town. People were emerging from buildings, drawn by the sound of the shot. Catherine pushed through them, her heart hammering, terror giving her speed. She found Ethan in the street outside the freight office, blood on his hands but alive. Alive and whole, and looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Victor, she asked breathlessly, shot in the shoulder, under arrest. He'll live to stand trial. The relief was so intense, Catherine's knees buckled. Ethan caught her, held her steady, and for a moment they just stood there in the middle of the street while the town gathered around them. It's over, Ethan said quietly. Really over. You're free. Catherine looked up at the man who'd come back from the dead to save her. The boy she'd loved, who'd become a stranger, who'd become Something else. Something more. No, she said. It's not over. It's just beginning. And there, with half of Timber Ridge watching Catherine Hayes Blackwell, reached up and pulled Ethan Carver down into a kiss. The kiss lasted only a moment, but in that moment, Catherine felt 14 years of separation collapse into nothing. Ethan's lips were cold from the winter air, his hands gentle despite the violence they just committed, and when they finally pulled apart, Catherine saw in his eyes everything she'd thought lost forever. Hope. The crowd around them erupted in confused murmurs. Victor Blackwell being arrested was shocking enough. His wife kissing another man in the street was scandalous. Catherine didn't care. Get her inside, Captain Henderson ordered, already moving to secure the crime scene. Both of you, before Blackwell's associates realize what's happening and try something stupid. Reverend Matthews appeared slightly winded from running. The church. Bring her to the church. It's sanctuary. They moved quickly, Ethan keeping Catherine close, Martha and Dr. Brennan flanking them, the Reverend leading the way. Behind them, they could hear Sheriff Dalton's voice raised in protest as Henderson forced him to officially arrest Victor Blackwell. The church was cold and empty when they entered. Reverend Matthews lit candles while Martha guided Catherine to a pew. The adrenaline that had carried her through the morning was fading, leaving behind a bone-deep exhaustion. Is it really over? Catherine asked quietly. The worst part is, Ethan said, settling beside her, but there's still a trial to get through. Testimony to give. And Blackwell has money and friends. He'll fight this with everything he has. Let him fight. Catherine's voice was steady despite her trembling hands. I'm not afraid of him anymore. Not now that I know the truth. Not now that people finally believe me. Dr. Brennan approached hesitantly, a small medical bag in his shaking hands. Mrs. Blackwell, if I may, I'd like to examine your injuries, document them properly, for the trial. Catherine nodded, understanding what he was offering. Evidence, proof of Victor's abuse that couldn't be dismissed or explained away. She removed her shawl and unbuttoned the high collar of her dress. The bruises on her throat were purple-black, perfect impressions of Victor's fingers from 2 nights ago, when he'd choked her for taking too long to undress. The marks on her wrists were equally clear, and when she lifted her sleeve, the cigarette burn on her forearm, punishment for flinching, when he'd reached for her, was still an angry red. Ethan made a sound low in his throat, something between a growl and a groan. His hands clenched into fists. Easy, Henderson murmured to him. Blackwell will pay for this. Legally. Don't give him the satisfaction of turning you into a murderer. Dr. Brennan worked with quiet efficiency, cataloging each injury in his medical journal, sketching rough diagrams, noting dates and probable causes. When he finished, his hands were shaking, worse than before. I'm sorry, he whispered to Catherine, for not protecting you, for not protecting Sarah, for being too much of a coward to... You're protecting me now, Catherine interrupted gently. That's what matters. The past is done, Dr. Shrandon. All we can do is try to make the future better. The doctor nodded, not trusting himself to speak. Outside voices were rising, angry voices. Catherine recognized some of them men who worked for Victor's freight company business partners, people who had profited from his criminal enterprise. We can't keep her here indefinitely, Reverend Matthews said. Eventually someone will try to take her back to the Blackwell house, claim marital rights. Over my dead body, Ethan said flatly. That's what they're hoping for, Henderson replied. An excuse to claim self-defense when they kill you. No, we need to move her somewhere safer. Somewhere Blackwell's influence doesn't reach. Fort Benton, Martha suggested. It's 3 days north. Army jurisdiction. If we can get her there, she'll be under federal protection while the investigation proceeds. 3 days through mountain passes in Winnipeg. Dr. Brennan shook his head. It's suicide. So is staying here. Ethan looked at Catherine. Can you ride? I used to ride all the time, back in Missouri, before... She trailed off, then straightened her shoulders. Yes, I can ride. Then we leave tonight, after dark when the town's asleep. Ethan turned to Henderson. Can you hold things here? Keep Blackwell locked up and start the formal investigation? I can try, but you need to understand, if you take his wife and flee in the night, every lawman between here and Canada will be hunting you as kidnappers. Blackwell will spin this as you forcing her against her will. Then I'll give testimony, Catherine said firmly. I'll write a statement to sign it, have it witnessed, stating clearly that I'm leaving of my own free will, that I fear for my life, and that I'm seeking federal protection from an abusive husband. Make copies. Send them to every newspaper, every judge, every authority you can think of. Let Victor try to twist that." Henderson smiled slightly. "You're braver than you know, Mrs. Blackwell." "It's Miss Hayes now," Catherine corrected. "Or it will be once the marriage is annulled. I never want to carry that man's name again." They spent the afternoon preparing. Owen Fletcher quietly gathered supplies, winter gear, food horses, strong enough for mountain travel. His son Tommy proved invaluable, moving through town without attracting suspicion, reporting on Victor's condition stable, but raging in his cell on the mood of the townspeople, shocked and divided on the movements of Blackwell's business associates gathering planning dangerous. Martha packed Catherine's few belongings from the Blackwell house, moving quickly while most of town was distracted by the scandal. She also retrieved Sarah's journals and the last of the evidence they'd need. Dr. Brennan, despite his trembling hands and morphine-clouded mind, wrote out detailed medical testimony of both Sarah's and Catherine's injuries. He signed it, had it witnessed by Reverend Matthews, and made 3 copies. And Catherine wrote her statement. She sat at the Reverend's desk with a pen and paper and poured out everything. The lies Victor had told about her mother, the forced marriage, the abuse, the fear, the drugging, the imprisonment. She wrote until her hand cramped, until the words blurred on the page, until she'd documented every crime, every cruelty, every moment of terror. When she finished, Reverend Matthews read it and looked at her with something like awe. "This is one of the bravest things I've ever witnessed," he said quietly. "It's just the truth. The truth requires enormous courage to tell, especially when you know the consequences." He signed his witness, then sealed the document. "I'll make sure this reaches the territorial governor, the Federal Marshal Service, and every newspaper editor who'll print it. By this time next week, everyone from here to Washington will know what Victor Blackwell really is." Catherine felt something loosen in her chest. "Thank you, Reverend, for believing me, for helping me, for doing what I should have done years ago when Sarah was still alive." His voice was heavy with regret. "I can't undo the past, Miss Hayes, but I can try to make the present a little more just." As evening approached, they gathered in the church basement for what might be their last meal together. Owen Fletcher had brought food from the inn, simple fare bread and cheese and dried meat, but it tasted like a feast after the tension of the day. "When will you leave?" Martha asked. "Midnight," Ethan said. "The moon will be up, giving us enough light to navigate, but most people will be asleep. We'll head north through the high pass, then cut east toward Fort Benton. If we're lucky, we'll be in Army territory by tomorrow evening. And if you're not lucky, then we'll be in Army territory by the day after." Ethan's voice was dry. "One way or another, we're getting Catherine to safety." Dr. Brennan cleared his throat. "I'd like to come with you." Everyone turned to look at him. "I know I'm not much use," he continued, his voice shaking but determined. "I'm addicted to morphine, my hands shake, and I'm probably more liability than asset. But I'm also the only doctor for 100 miles, and if anyone gets injured on the journey, you'll need me." "Dr. Brennan," Catherine said gently, "you don't have to." "Yes, I do," he met her eyes. "I couldn't save Sarah, but maybe I can help save you. It's the only redemption I'm likely to get in this life. Please, let me try." Ethan exchanged a glance with Henderson. "Can you ride?" "I used to be quite good, actually, before the war, before the morphine. The withdrawal will be hard, in the mountains in winter without supplies." "I know." Brennan's voice was steady now. "But maybe that's what I need, to finally face what I've been running from for so long. To be forced to be sober and clear-headed and useful again, even if only for a few days." Henderson nodded slowly. "Then you'll come, but you follow orders without question." "Understood." "Understood." Martha stood abruptly. "Then I'm coming too." "Absolutely not," Ethan said. "Why not?" "Because I'm a woman." Martha's eyes flashed. "Catherine's a woman, and she's riding 3 days through mountain passes. Dr. Brennan is a morphine addict, and he's coming." "Why shouldn't I?" "Because someone needs to stay here and make sure the evidence gets to the right people," Henderson interjected. "Someone Blackwell can't intimidate. Someone brave enough to stand up in court and testify about what they know." "Reverend Matthews can do that." "Reverend Matthews is a man. In matters concerning Sarah Blackwell's death and abuse, a woman's testimony will carry more weight. You're Sarah's sister. You have standing. You have credibility. Henderson's voice was firm but kind. I know you want to see this through to the end. But the most important thing you can do is stay here and fight the legal battle while we get Catherine to safety. Martha's shoulders slumped. I hate that you're right. Catherine stood and embraced her. Thank you for everything, for being my friend when I had none, for believing me, for risking everything to help me. I should have helped sooner, should have warned you before the wedding, could have, would have. Catherine pulled back to look Martha in the eyes. We can't change the past. We can only learn from it and try to do better. You've done that. You've done more than anyone had a right to ask of you. They held each other for a long moment, two women bound by shared suffering and shared strength. Midnight came too quickly and too slowly. Ethan and Henderson had scouted the roads out of town, identifying the path least likely to be watched. Tommy Fletcher brought the horses around to the back of the church, moving silently through the shadows. Owen Fletcher pressed extra supplies into their hands, blankets, ammunition, a bottle of whiskey for emergencies. Catherine changed out of her fine dress and into the practical clothing Martha had gathered: wool pants, a thick shirt, a heavy coat that had belonged to Sarah. It felt strange to wear men's clothing, but also liberating. Free. Dr. Brennan arrived with his medical bag and a haunted look in his eyes. He'd taken his last dose of morphine an hour ago and was already starting to shake. Last chance to back out, Ethan told him. I'm coming. Then let's move. They slipped out of the church one by one, mounting their horses in silence. Catherine's horse was a sturdy bay mare, calm and well-trained. She settled into the saddle with a feeling of rightness she hadn't experienced in months. This was freedom. This was choice. This was taking control of her own fate. Ethan led the way with Catherine behind him, Dr. Brennan bringing up the rear, and Henderson staying behind to coordinate with the authorities. The night was cold and clear stars blazing overhead, the moon painting the snow blue-white. They were almost to the edge of town when they heard it. Hoofbeats, coming fast, multiple riders. Go, Ethan shouted. Ride hard for the tree line. Catherine kicked her mare into a gallop, snow flying beneath hooves, wind stinging her face. Behind her she heard shouts, gunshots, the crack of bullets passing, too close. Victor's men. Somehow they'd known, somehow they'd been watching. They crashed into the forest branches, whipping past the trail, barely visible in the moonlight. Catherine bent low over her mare's neck, trusting the horse's instincts, focusing only on keeping her seat and staying close to Ethan's dark form ahead. More gunshots, one of the pursuers screaming. Then silence except for the thunder of hooves and labored breathing. They rode for what felt like hours, but was probably only 30 minutes, putting distance between themselves and Timber Ridge, climbing higher into the mountains where the snow lay deeper and the air grew thin. Finally, Ethan raised a hand, signaling a stop. They pulled up in a small clearing, horses blowing hard, riders gasping for breath. Everyone all right? Ethan asked. I think so, Catherine managed. Dr. Brennan. The doctor was slumped in his saddle, clutching his side. Shot, he said through gritted teeth. Not bad, just grazed. But Ethan was off his horse in an instant, helping Brennan dismount. In the moonlight, blood looked black against the doctor's coat. How bad? Catherine asked, dismounting as well. Through and through. Missed anything vital. Brennan was already opening his medical bag with shaking hands. I can treat it myself if someone can help me. Catherine stepped forward. Tell me what to do. Under Brennan's instruction, she cleaned the wound with whiskey, the doctor hissing in pain, then bound it tightly with bandages from his bag. Her hands were steady despite her racing heart. She'd seen worse injuries growing up on a farm, had helped her father tend sick animals, set broken bones, clean wounds. Thank you, Brennan whispered when she finished. Can you ride? I'll have to. We can't stop here, they'll be tracking us. Ethan was already scanning the forest behind them. They'll have to wait for daylight to track effectively, but we need to keep moving, put more distance between us. Dr. Brennan, can you manage another hour? I can manage whatever I need to manage. They rode on. The night became a blur of cold and exhaustion. The trail grew steeper, narrower, more treacherous. Twice, Catherine's mare stumbled on hidden ice. Once they had to dismount and lead the horses through a section where the path had partially collapsed. But they kept moving. As dawn began to lighten the eastern sky, They finally stopped at a sheltered spot beneath an overhang of rock. Ethan built a small fire while Catherine helped Dr. Brennan settle against a boulder. The doctor was pale and sweating despite the cold, his wound seeping blood through the bandages. "We need to rest," Catherine said. "All of us. If we push too hard, we'll make mistakes." Ethan nodded reluctantly. 2 hours. Then we move again. I'll take first watch. Catherine wanted to protest that he needed rest too, but she was too exhausted to argue. She wrapped herself in a blanket and closed her eyes, and dreamed of Victor Blackwell's hands around her throat. She woke to Ethan shaking her shoulder, his finger to his lips. The fire was out, everything packed. Dr. Brennan was already mounted, looking worse than before, but still upright. "What is it?" Catherine whispered. "Riders. A mile back, maybe less. They've picked up our trail." "How many?" "4 or 5. Hard to tell from the tracks." "Blackwell's men?" "Most likely." Ethan helped her mount. "We need to move faster. There's a box canyon about 3 miles ahead. If we can reach it, we can defend it. Make a stand if necessary." If necessary. The words hung in the cold air like a threat. They rode hard, pushing the horses to the edge of their endurance. Catherine could hear the pursuers now, distant shouts, the crack of branches. They were gaining. The canyon appeared suddenly, a narrow cleft between two massive rock walls. Ethan led them inside, then stopped, studying the terrain with a tactical eye that spoke of military experience. "This is good," he said. "Only one way in. High ground on both sides. If they come at us, we'll see them coming." "And if they siege us?" Catherine asked. "Then we hope Henderson gets federal marshals here before we run out of ammunition." They positioned themselves, Ethan and Catherine, behind a tumble of boulders near the canyon entrance. Dr. Brennan further back where he could tend wounds if necessary. And they waited. The riders appeared within minutes. 5 men, heavily armed, wearing the rough clothes of freight workers, but moving with the coordination of experienced fighters. Victor had hired guns then. Professionals. The leader called out, "Mrs. Blackwell, your husband wants you to come home. He's worried about you. Says you've been kidnapped by this madman." Catherine stepped into view before Ethan could stop her. "I haven't been kidnapped," she shouted back. "I left of my own free will. Tell Victor Blackwell that I'm never coming back. Tell him his lies are exposed and his crimes will be punished, and I'd rather die free in these mountains than spend one more day as his prisoner." Silence, then the leader laughed. "That's a real pretty speech, ma'am, but it don't change facts. You're his wife. Law says you belong to him, and Mr. Blackwell pays real good for people who do what he wants. So you can come peaceable, or we can come get you. Your choice." "My choice," Catherine said clearly, "is to defend myself, by any means necessary." She raised the rifle Ethan had given her. The men looked at each other, seemed to come to a decision, and opened fire. Catherine dove behind the boulder as bullets whined overhead, ricocheting off rock, kicking up sprays of snow. She'd never fired a gun at another person before, never killed anything larger than a rabbit. But when one of the hired guns came around the side of the canyon, rifle raised, aiming at Ethan's back, she didn't hesitate. She fired. The man went down. Catherine stared at what she'd done, shock and horror washing over her. The man was still moving, clutching his leg where her bullet had struck, cursing and crawling back toward cover. "Good shot," Ethan said, his own rifle barking steadily. "You saved my life. I shot someone. You defended yourself. There's a difference." He fired again, and one of the attackers yelped, "Now keep shooting. They're regrouping." The next 10 minutes were chaos, gunfire echoing off canyon walls, smoke and snow swirling, men shouting, horses screaming. Dr. Brennan, despite his wound and his shaking hands, proved to be a decent shot. One of the hired guns went down, clutching his shoulder. Then as suddenly as it started, the shooting stopped. "They're retreating," Ethan called. "Stay down." Catherine risked a glance around the boulder. The hired guns were indeed falling back, dragging their wounded with them, their leader shouting orders to regroup down the canyon. "Did we win?" she asked. "We survived," Ethan corrected. "They'll be back with reinforcements. Or they'll try to wait us out. Either way, we can't stay here." "Where can we go? They've blocked the only exit." Ethan pointed up. "There. See that ledge? It connects to another canyon system. Narrow, hard to navigate, but it leads north toward Fort Benton. If we can climb to it, we can get around them." Catherine looked at the sheer rock wall, the narrow ledge barely visible, 50 feet up, and felt her stomach drop. You want us to climb that with horses? Without horses, we'll have to leave them. Dr. Brennan can barely stand. How is he supposed to climb? They both turned to look at the doctor, who was slumped against a rock, his face gray, his bandages soaked with blood. I'm, I'm slowing you down, Brennan said quietly. Leave me. Create a distraction so you can escape. Absolutely not, Catherine said. Miss Hayes, please. I'm dying anyway. The wound's infected. I can feel the fever starting. And without morphine, he laughed bitterly. I'm already going through withdrawal, the shaking, the pain, the sickness. I won't make it to Fort Benton. I'll only get you both killed. We don't leave people behind, Ethan said firmly. That's not who we are. Not anymore. Then you're fools. But Brennan smiled slightly. Noble fools, the best kind. Gunfire erupted again, closer this time. The hired guns had found courage and were advancing. Decision time, Ethan said. We climb or we die here. What's it going to be? Catherine looked at the cliff, at the doctor, at Ethan, at the men with guns who wanted to drag her back to Victor Blackwell's hell, and she made her choice. We climb. The ascent was a nightmare. Catherine had climbed trees as a child, had scrambled over rocks and fences and all manner of obstacles. But that was years ago, and she'd never attempted anything like this. 50 feet of nearly vertical rock face, icy handholds with bullets occasionally whizzing past, and the knowledge that one slip would mean death. Ethan went first, finding the route, testing each handhold. Catherine followed, her fingers numb with cold, her muscles screaming. Behind her, Dr. Brennan climbed with grim determination, his face twisted in pain. Halfway up, Catherine's foot slipped. She fell only a few feet before her hands caught on a jutting rock, but those few feet felt like forever. Her heart hammered, her breath came in gasps, and for a moment she couldn't move, couldn't do anything but cling to the cold stone and try not to look down. Catherine, Ethan's voice cut through her panic. Look at me, not down, at me. She lifted her head. He was directly above her, one hand extended. You can do this. I know you can. The girl who used to climb the old oak tree behind your house, the one everyone said was unclimbable, that girl is still in there. She's not afraid of heights. She's not afraid of anything. That girl, Catherine panted, wasn't being shot at. No, but she was brave, and you're still brave. Prove it. One handhold at a time. Come on. Catherine took a breath, another, then she found her footing and began to climb again. They reached the ledge just as the hired guns figured out what they were doing and concentrated their fire on the cliff face. Bullets spanged off rock inches from Catherine's head. Dr. Brennan cried out as a ricochet grazed his arm. But they made it. They collapsed on the narrow ledge, gasping, shaking, bleeding. Below, the hired guns were arguing about whether to attempt the climb themselves. None of them seemed eager. We did it, Catherine managed. First part, Ethan said. Now we have to traverse this ledge to the next canyon. It's about a quarter mile, narrow, exposed. But if we can make it, then we're free. Catherine finished. Dr. Brennan groaned. I don't think I can walk a quarter mile. Hell, I don't think I can walk 10 feet. Catherine examined his wounds in the dim light. The bullet graze from earlier had reopened. The infection Brennan had mentioned was clearly taking hold. His skin was hot, his eyes glassy with fever. We'll help you, she said. You'll slow yourselves down. Leave me, please. At least let my death mean something. Your death isn't going to mean anything, Ethan said flatly, because you're not dying, not today. Now get up, that's an order. Something in Ethan's voice, command, certainty, strength, made the doctor respond. He struggled to his feet with Catherine's help, swaying but upright. They began the traverse. The ledge was even narrower than it had appeared from below. Barely 3 feet wide in places, with a sheer drop on one side and equally sheer rock wall on the other. Snow-covered treacherous patches of ice. The wind funneled between the canyon walls, pushed at them with vicious force. Catherine had never been more terrified in her life. But she kept moving. One step. Another. Ethan ahead, steadying her when she faltered. Dr. Brennan behind, leaning heavily on her shoulder, his breathing labored, but determined. Behind them, they heard shouts. The hired guns had decided to attempt the climb after all, or at least one brave or foolish soul had. "Don't look back," Ethan commanded. "Just keep moving." The traverse took forever. An eternity of cold stone and empty air and burning muscles and pure fear. But finally, the ledge widened, opened into a broader path, then descended into another canyon. They'd made it. Catherine wanted to collapse to cry, to simply sit and not move for a week. But Ethan was already scouting ahead, and Dr. Brennan was sliding down the canyon wall, barely conscious. "How far to Fort Benton?" Catherine asked. "Day and a half, maybe less if we can find horses. And if we can't, then we walk." A gunshot echoed from behind them. One of the hired guns had made it to the ledge and was taking aim. The bullet struck rock near Catherine's head, sending stone fragments flying. "Move!" Ethan shouted. They ran, stumbling, exhausted, but moving deeper into the canyon around a bend that gave them momentary cover. The gunfire continued, but more distant now, the shooter unable to pursue and shoot at the same time. "Keep going," Ethan urged. "We just need to—" He stopped. Ahead, blocking the canyon, was a group of riders. At least a dozen, heavily armed, wearing the mix of buckskin and army surplus that marked them as either scouts or outlaws, or both. The leader, a lean native man with gray streaking his black hair, raised a hand. His men surrounded them, rifles ready, but not yet aimed. "Ethan Carver," the man said, his English accented but clear. "We meet again." Ethan's whole body went rigid. "Running Wolf." Down. Catherine felt ice spread through her veins. Running Wolf, the man who'd led the raid on Ethan's family, the killer who'd taken money from Victor Blackwell to murder innocent people and make it look like a random attack. Ethan's hand moved to his pistol. "I wouldn't," Running Wolf said calmly. "My men are excellent shots. You'd be dead before you cleared leather." "Why are you here?" Ethan's voice was barely controlled rage. "We've been tracking you since you left Timber Ridge. Victor Blackwell sent word, offered a great deal of money for your death and the woman's return." Running Wolf's eyes moved to Catherine, assessing. "But I think perhaps Blackwell's money is not as valuable as it once was. I think perhaps his luck has changed." "So you'll kill us for free instead of for pay," Ethan spat. "How generous." "I didn't say I'd kill you." Running Wolf dismounted, approached slowly, his hands visible and empty. 14 years ago, I was paid to kill your family. I did. It was business, nothing personal. But since then, I've learned things. About the man who hired me, about his other crimes, about the way he uses people and discards them. And I think Victor Blackwell has made too many enemies. I think his empire is falling. I think the smart move is to be on the winning side when it does. Running Wolf stopped a few feet from Ethan. "So I offer you a deal. Safe passage to Fort Benton, protection from Blackwell's hired men. In exchange for what?" "For testimony, for the truth. I'll tell the federal marshals everything, how Blackwell hired me, what he paid, what he wanted. I'll help you destroy him completely. In return, I want immunity for my past crimes." Ethan stared at him. "You murdered my family, and you want me to help you avoid punishment? I want to make things right the only way I can, by ensuring the man who ordered their deaths pays for his crimes, by protecting others from suffering the same fate." Running Wolf's expression was unreadable. "I can't undo the past, neither can you, but we can perhaps build a better future, if we're willing to set aside revenge for justice." Catherine could see the war in Ethan's eyes, the desire for vengeance battling with the need for something greater. She stepped forward, placed a hand on his arm. "Ethan, he's right. If he testifies, Victor will be convicted. Everything he's done, everyone he's hurt, it will all come to light. Isn't that worth more than revenge? He killed my mother, my brother. I know, and you'll carry that pain forever. But if you kill him now, you become what he is, and Victor wins." She gripped his arm tighter. "Don't let Victor turn you into a murderer, please." The silence stretched. Then Ethan lowered his hand from his pistol. "Safe passage to Fort Benton," he said hoarsely. "Full testimony to the marshals. And you turn yourself in for trial. Those are my terms." Running Wolf nodded slowly. "Agreed. And if you betray us, then you have my permission to kill me in whatever way brings you peace." Running Wolf offered his hand. "Do we have a deal?" Ethan stared at the extended hand for a long moment. Then slowly he took it. Stim. With Running Wolf's men as escort, the journey to Fort Benton became almost easy. They had fresh horses, supplies, and armed protection against any of Blackwell's remaining hired guns. Dr. Brennan received proper care. One of Running Wolf's men had some medical knowledge and helped redress the doctor's wounds and dose him with willow bark for the fever. Catherine rode beside Ethan, watching emotions flicker across his face. She could only imagine what it cost him to accept help from the man who'd destroyed his family. But he did it. For her, for justice, for the possibility of a better ending. They reached Fort Benton 2 days later. The fort was a sprawling complex of buildings and walls flying the American flag, bustling with soldiers and traders in the constant activity of a frontier military post. Captain Henderson was there waiting for them, having ridden hard from Timber Ridge with news of what had happened. And standing beside Henderson were 2 federal marshals and a man Catherine recognized from newspaper illustrations, the territorial governor. "Miss Hayes," the governor said, tipping his hat, "I've read your statement, along with Dr. Brennan's medical testimony, Sarah Blackwell's journals, and a very interesting letter from Reverend Matthews. I've also received word that Mr. Running Wolf here is willing to testify to being hired by Victor Blackwell to commit murder." "That's correct, sir," Catherine said, dismounting with legs that barely held her. "Then I'm pleased to inform you that Victor Blackwell has been formally charged with multiple counts of murder, conspiracy to commit murder, weapons, smuggling, fraud, and various other crimes that will likely keep him in prison for the rest of his natural life, if he's not hanged first." Catherine felt something break loose inside her, tension she'd been holding for so long, she'd forgotten it was there. "It's over," she whispered. "Not quite," the governor said gently. "There will be a trial. You'll need to testify. It won't be easy. Blackwell's lawyers will try to discredit you, to paint you as an unfaithful wife, to make it seem like you're lying. But with the evidence we have, I'm